Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
And here we go.
Live from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, welcome to episode 74.2 of the Confirmed Epic Podcast, the official podcast of theepicreview.com and proudly presented by the Geeks Worldwide Radio Network. I, of course, am your host, the real Brad Bell, and I'll be flying solo tonight for another point edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. These allow us to check in with you and talk what we've been checking out, as well as the epic news items of the week, even when we don't have a big feature film review or home Blu-ray review. We do have a review upcoming in episode 75 of the Confirmed Epic Podcast of the Andy Muschietti adaptation of the Stephen King classic novel It, which is breaking all kinds of box office records this weekend, and AK Andrew Stokes and I will bring you that later next week. In the meantime, let's get into what I've been checking out.
Checklist? Check. Double check enough checklists? Check.
Well, folks, unfortunately, I've been checking out some rather serious stuff this week in the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina. The entire country, it seems like, anywhere in the east, southeast, has been dealing with at least the fallout and the threats of potential hurricanes. What a crazy hurricane season we have had so far, and hopefully it's going to get a lot better. But we have Hurricane Irma, which is heading toward Florida right now as we record this podcast on a Saturday night. We just dealt with the hurricane in Houston, Hurricane Harvey. Some people did some great things. I know J.J. Watt, the Texans' future Hall of Fame defensive end, raised $17 million for the people of Houston, which is really just a drop in the bucket considering there were billions of dollars worth of flood damage due to Hurricane Harvey in Houston. But unfortunately, we have Irma right on the hills of Florida. Behind that, we have Jose. And then beyond that, there's Katia, which is forming in the Gulf. So you're talking within 2.5 weeks, 4 major hurricanes. It sounds like a disaster movie, folks, and I really, really wish it was. But unfortunately, this isn't a movie. It is reality. And up until about 48 hours ago, it looked like Hurricane Irma was coming right toward the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, which is actually the Charlotte, North Carolina area. But unfortunately for our neighbors to the west, but fortunately for us, the hurricane took a kind of unexpected shift west, so it's hitting Florida, Georgia, the western part of South Carolina, and then kind of moving on to Tennessee. Maybe the mountains of North Carolina are going to get hit a little bit, but we're very blessed in this region. But it was crazy here this week. All that anyone was talking about was Irma. We had a hurricane here that hit in 1989 called Hugo. You got to understand, not that anybody's used to hurricanes, but it's kind of like snow. Let me give you an example. When it snows in Michigan and Ohio, 2-3 inches, no big deal. Buses are running on schedule. The clocks are running on time. When it snows a 1/2 inch in North Carolina, yeah, we're not having school for like 2 days, which is awesome as a school teacher, but frustrating when you have a wife who's a nurse who has to be there come hell or high water. But hurricanes are much the same. You have, the places in like Charleston, South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, Holden Beach, North Carolina. The coast here in the Carolinas are used to dealing with these type of threats, so they're more prepared. We, further west, further inland, are not. Again, we hadn't had a hurricane since 1989. I was 2 years old at the time. And the name of that hurricane was Hurricane Hugo. And there's a lot of horror stories from parents, grandparents, about them going in-laws without them going without power for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. So when this looked like it was taking the exact same track as Hurricane Hugo, you would have thought that the zombie apocalypse was about to hit. You would have thought that it was about to start looking like The Road out here. I mean, with Viggo Mortensen, it was pretty unbelievable. I went to my local food line about 3 minutes from my house. No water, no D batteries. Ended up spending somehow like over $100 on Propel and flashlights, it feels like. But I wanted to have ice. I wanted to make sure I had a cooler just to make, if there was no running water or we went without power, we'd have a way to save some of that food we had in our refrigerator. So it was an absolute madhouse. And I think that I talked to Andrew. He dealt with the same thing. And there was a lot of people here that had just been seeing madness in the grocery stores. The news networks have been going nuts. But our thoughts and prayers at Geeks Worldwide Radio Network and from the epicreview.com are with those people who are dealing with Irma directly, and we hope you got out safe. So, on to some lighter stuff that I've been checking out. I got a chance to read the Dark Tower graphic novel. This is another Stephen King adaptation here. And it's weird how this is set up, because when I first heard about the Dark Tower graphic novel, I was like, okay, they've taken the book and they've adapted it. But that's actually not what they've done at all. This is by Peter David is doing the script here with the, oh my God, the art, jaw-dropping. It's Jay Lee on the art. He's done not Batman versus Superman. It's not Zack Snyder, but Batman and Superman for DC and the New 52. I know those were really gorgeous, despite the writing maybe not always being the best. This Dark Tower graphic novel, though, was just bad. I mean, even confirmed epic art from Jay Lee could not save it. I've read a bunch of complicated storylines. I read Grant Morrison's whole Batman run. I read Grant Morrison's X-Men run. I've read a bunch of Grant Morrison stuff. Not that this has Grant Morrison. I'm just using that as an example to say, hey, I haven't just read the big blockbuster stuff from Mark Millar. No disrespect to Millar. But this did not flow. It felt very incoherent. It felt like somebody had written out a little book and they were struggling to break it down into an actual comic book. So I cannot say that I would recommend this Dark Tower graphic novel. And then that kind of bums me out because the movie was bad, which I hadn't seen. Again, just going off hearsay, I will see it when it hits home video. The comic's not that good at all. I mean, I would give it a crap. I was very upset reading this comic. I have a confession to make. I usually don't have a bad temper, but I was really excited for this whole Dark Tower thing. The movie supposedly sucked. Again, I will watch it. But the comic, hey, you go on Amazon, it's got like an average of 4.5 reviews, and it's universally well received. So maybe it's just me. Maybe I have a lack of taste. I know some of our listeners may agree with that based on my Transformers Last Night rating. But I'm reading this, and again, not a bad temper. I'm not Bruce Banner here. I wouldn't say I slammed this book, but I kind of threw it down. It was a nice hardcover, kind of in disgust. Like, it's been a long time since I think the last time I put a comic down was when I was reading the Marvel versus DC trade from the 90s. So that tells you that I don't do that often, but this was not good at all. Again, the Dark Tower graphic novel volume 1. The universe is cool, the characters are cool, the story just didn't work. Maybe I'll give the first book a chance, but I'm reading some other stuff right now that I'll talk about on future podcasts. I also got to check out the premiere of American Horror Story Season 7. This season is entitled Cult. I love this show. I've watched every season with my wife, so it's one of our favorites to sit and enjoy together. And I love this season premiere. It's combining two of the most frightening things in the horror zeitgeist and landscape, which is politics and clowns. And Abby, my wife, asked me, the mother of Beagles, of course, what's up with all these clowns? And it's like, it's really big right now. It's not only this huge blockbuster in September, but the book's #1 again on the New York Times bestseller list. American Horror Story Cult has a big clown presence. I won't spoil that here, especially it harkens back to previous clowns than other American Horror Story seasons, which fans of the show will know who and what I'm referencing. And I told Abby, I said, most of this stuff was probably being written when that whole clown craze was going on. You guys remember that? God, that was creepy. But those clowns were just showing up at gas stations and like walking out of people's woods at their house, and eventually they started getting shot and beaten up, and they quit that shit. But I mean, it didn't make it any less eerie. And when all that stuff that was written in has finally came out now, it's created this weird like clown bubble, which is gonna last a while and then probably burst with the Joker origin movie by DC. But that's a separate story that I don't want to talk about because I'm burnt out on damn DC movies. Good God, can they get their crap together? Anyway, Evan Peters plays a Trump-obsessed, I don't even know if I would like label him as some like red-blooded conservative. He's just somebody who's fired up by hate rhetoric, and that was always the scary thing to me with Donald Trump. I was never really scared of Donald Trump. It was the people that he emboldened. But I don't want to get too political on this podcast. I've done that before on Twitter and whatnot if you want to look hard enough. I mean, I'm not opposed to talking politics, but this is a entertainment show. Not that politics can't be entertaining, as the last year and a half has shown us. And then on the other side of the political spectrum, you had Sarah Paulson playing this like bleeding heart liberal, and to see how they react to the defeat of Hillary Clinton from Sarah Paulson, to the emboldenment and the ecstatic and pure joy that Evan Peters' character, who's a big Trump fan, how he reacts, and just how hate and fear are used to manipulate society. It was well done, and I don't know if I've really seen anything like this. I know I hadn't from American Horror Story, but something that takes these classic horror elements along with that kind of subverting of the horror genre that American Horror Story and Ryan Murphy, the creator and showrunner of American Horror Story, have done so well. Well, mostly well. Roanoke sucked, but done mostly well for the past 7 years, and mix those horror elements with what's going on in the world right now. And I think this is going to be a return to form for the show. I think the last really great season of American Horror Story was probably, our good season was Freak Show. That was season 4. Coven was the last great season. That was about the witches in season 3. You had Hotel season 5. That was good, not great. And Roanoke was by far the worst season. So I'm really, really excited for what's what looks like it will occur in American Horror Story season 7. The only thing I'm kind of concerned about here is Sarah Paulson's character is loud, over the top, and that's how she's supposed to be because she's traumatized, but it can come across as just very overwhelming, and she's just, as Jerry Barbecue 17 Reed would say, leaving her tooth marks on the scenery, on the actual film reel, if anybody actually used film besides Christopher Nolan these days. But that's a minor nitpick. That bothered my wife more than it did me. I'm like, that's how the character was supposed to be. But yeah, if you like American Horror Story, if you're not too freaked out by clowns, if you are right now, I'm sorry for you with kind of the way pop culture is. The clown bubble will burst once Star Wars fever hits this high pitch. So that's going to be about it for what I've been checking out this week. So let's go ahead and get into the epic news. So our featured discussion this week will be about Colin Trevorrow departing Star Wars Episode 9, and that is what this episode 74.2 of the Confirmed Epic podcast will culminate in. But before we get there, let's get into some other epic news items from this week. And gosh, it has been a huge week. I was really thinking about saving this news for when we did our It podcast, probably next weekend, guys. The podcast may be a little late, probably not hitting on Thursday due to Andrew's work schedule. However, it would have just been too backed up, and I felt like this news was worth talking about. I just didn't want to flush it down into the sewer with Pennywise. So let's start with some Star Wars news, and I'm going to try to mix up Star Wars and superhero news in here instead of just hitting you with that back to back to back. So, Paul Bettany has joined Han Solo. It is an unknown role at this time. Paul Bettany, of course, is best known for playing the Vision and the voice of Jarvis. He has worked with Ron Howard before on the Da Vinci Code, played a really, really freaky character in that movie. I like Paul Bettany. I wouldn't say I'm a massive fan of his. The character that he is playing, we know absolutely nothing about. I'm imagining it's going to be kind of a smuggish or overly intelligent kind of foil to Han Solo, just based on roles that he has played in the past. But I think that this film continues to get better and better news because Ron Howard steps in. He's a known quantity in Hollywood. I trust him completely. You add Paul Bettany, Lord and Miller were just kind of all over the place. So I think that this is good news. I could see him play an alien character here. I mean, it's very, very infinite possibilities with what Paul Bettany could bring to the Han Solo movie, and that movie hits May 25th, 2018. I wouldn't be shocked, though, with all these changes and stuff, if they push that back to December 2019, and then they just end up push that to May 2019, and then they end up pushing episode 9, which we'll talk about later in the show, to the end of that year, December 2019. Why not just stick with December, Lucasfilm? That's not that you could release a Star Wars movie any time of the year and it not make billions of dollars, but it seems to have really worked for them in December. So I hope that's where we see the Millennium Falcon taking flight once again. Speaking of the box office, the Inhumans debuted dead last at the box office on Labor Day weekend, which was the worst box office weekend take, that is, since the weekend after September 11th, 2001. Now, in all seriousness, this wasn't all the Inhumans' fault. It was a lot to do with Harvey and just the amount of damage across Texas. I mean, you're taking a major part of one of the biggest states in the entire country, and that's a lot of people that would have went to the movies and unfortunately were not able to go because of tragic circumstances or didn't want to risk it. And hey, I do not try to compare box office to people's lives, so don't take this out of context. Obviously, dealing with a Category 4, 5, 3 hurricane's much more important than what it makes at the box office. But it's kind of amazed me how it's tracking, and we'll talk about that later in the show, based on the severe weather threats, especially in a big state like Florida, which has pretty much been evacuated, especially the southern portion of Florida, at this point. But back to this whole Inhumans thing. Who thought it was a good idea to release the first episode of a TV show for characters that people have not really liked being pushed in their face? Who thought that was a good idea? I guess Kevin Feige? It's a rare bad decision and bad idea from the mastermind behind Marvel Studios and much of the MCU. But, man, Marvel, just quit pushing Inhumans. This show's gonna tank. The IMAX thing tanked. And that was a bit of execution, marketing, and just the idea, why is this on IMAX and the show's not coming out for weeks and weeks? So the timing felt a bit off there, too. It was weird. If you're going to put any show on IMAX, I mean, I could see like the last 2 episodes of Game of Thrones or something in 2019. Hell, I'd go see that in IMAX. But the first episode, usually it's the reverse, right? Like, you have the Entourage movie. After the Entourage show's over, you have 2 Sex and the City movies. After the Sex and the City show's over, you have terrible remakes of shows years down the line, like the Brady Bunch and Starsky and Hutch. I mean, I admire Feige and the Marvel MCU for trying to think outside the box and do something different, but I just don't think this was the group of characters to do it with, and I wouldn't expect any TV shows to be in IMAX, let alone probably in theaters for quite some time. So I don't even think it made. I think it made maybe over $1 million, but it was not good. It was not good at all. Speaking of not good, let's move to the DCEU. So now that The Rock, he was going to play Black Adam anyway, but The Rock has dropped out of the whole Shazam thing after being tied to it for like 7 years, almost a decade. Now that they're eyeing, WB is in the DCEU, John Cena to play Shazam. Obviously, the older Shazam and not Billy Bastion. Those of you that are not familiar with the Shazam character, it is really a child, Billy Bastion, who's about 11, 12 years old, give or take, depending on the incarnation of the character, who has the magical power to transform into this Superman-type character that is infinitely strong and has a rival who's like the same. That's Black Adam. That's who The Rock was going to play. I don't understand this like push for John Cena, and it makes me, I don't know, if I was his agent, I would tread very lightly, because you're starting I know he's been in stuff like The Marine, but you're starting your big first film spots. You're the beginning of your quote-unquote film career with the Transformers franchise at Paramount, which has been universally panned, and the DCEU at WB, which has been, with the exception of Wonder Woman, universally panned. And Shazam, people aren't going to go see Shazam on a poster or a YouTube trailer or TV spot and be like, oh, well, I'm just going to go because it's Shazam. He's not a character like a Superman or Batman or even a Wonder Woman who's recognizable and can draw. So you're going to need some star power there, I think. And John Cena's recognizable, and people in his own industry hate the guy. So what makes me think he can draw people to the theater? Now, I mean, I'm not speaking ill of him as a wrestling entertainer, because he's polarizing, right? He's the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Yankees. People love him or they love to hate him. It'd be interesting to see how that works on the big screen when he's playing real characters in real movies instead of playing the Marine. So John Cena, he was in Trainwreck. He was pretty good in that movie. It was a very deadpan humor, not that big of a cameo, but hey, he's not terrible, so we'll see. Indiana Jones 5 is confirmed for July 10th, 2020. The big news here is Steven Spielberg will be directing, of course. We've known this, but it has been confirmed by Spielberg that Mutt Williams will not be returning. So no Shia LaBeouf swinging from vines in this version of Indy. So you can sleep easy at night, Indy fans, especially you people over at the IndyCast, great Indiana Jones podcast over on the Forcecast, the Force.net network. So check them out. I'm excited for this because so far the Harrison Ford farewell tour has been good with The Force Awakens. Blade Runner 2049 looks like it's going to be epic in all sense of the words, including this nearly 3-hour runtime. And why not top it off with the whip and fedora? It's cool to see Harrison Ford revisit these characters so many years down the line, and if anybody can do it, it's him. The man can still fit into the original Indiana Jones costume that he did in his early 30s, late 20s, at the age of like 75 or something like that. But he's got to keep making that money, I guess, to leave to Callista Flockhart, his lovely wife. But I'm excited for it. Staying with Lucasfilm here, Snoke. We all wanted to figure out who Snoke was, what his plan with Kylo Ren is. Was he Plagueis? Was he somebody else? But it's looking like, guys, we're not going to find that out in The Last Jedi. In fact, director Rian Johnson has come out and said that Snoke is a character in the sense of serving the plot of this movie only. You're not getting a big grandiose backstory about Supreme Leader Snoke. He'll play a role in relation to Kylo Ren. But man, I'm bummed out by this news. I don't know if I can truly be bummed out about it yet. Now, if we get to the end of episode 9 and we don't know anything about Snoke and he was really a nothing character, just somebody in the shadows for the sake of being in the shadows, to be almost like some type of Palpatine stand-in, then I'll be extremely upset. However, at this point, I trust Rian Johnson enough to know that he's going to do the right thing with this franchise. I'm really excited for Last Jedi. It's the only Star Wars movie I'm excited for right now based on recent news and events, but we can talk about that later in the show. One of my favorite surprise films of this year was 47 Meters Down. The VOD movie turned summer release was, I thought, better than The Shallows, and now it looks like we're getting a sequel. That's right, 48 Meters Down will be hitting theaters sometime in the near future. They're not getting any creativity points on that name, and if it's anything like the first one, I'll go see it. I'm excited to see it, but this film was like lightning in a bottle. Surprise lightning in a bottle. I don't even know if I'd call it lightning in a bottle. It was more like static electricity in a bottle. And the fact that they got what they did out of a VOD movie, it's like, well, push your luck. I mean, this is a small studio. I can't even tell you the name of the studio, but I'm sure they are just trying to cash in all they can on this. If you have not seen 47 Meters Down, though, and you're not deathly afraid of sharks, go check this movie out. It comes out the end of September on Blu-ray, DVD, and I'm sure on all your on-demand services. And I think you'll be quite surprised, because I was going to be dismissive of 47 Meters Down. Ended up giving it a great when I rated it over at the epicreview.com. You can check out that review there. Jared Leto. Yeah. He is confused over the Joker movie news. On one hand, he's playing Joker in this Joker Harley movie and maybe in Suicide Squad 2. He, however, cannot understand why he's not playing Joker in the Joker origin story movie. I just can't understand why there is a Joker origin story movie. If Leto was in it, I really wouldn't understand that. I thought that his performance in Suicide Squad was very solid, but nothing spectacular. I do think like how he gets shit on for that role is a bit ridiculous, though. I mean, he put a lot of effort into that, and he takes a lot of crap for being a method actor, and I don't understand that. It seems like everybody else gets praise for it, and you're gonna, crap on this man on a weekly basis on film blogs and podcasts because he really gets into the characters he's playing. I mean, he's an Academy Award winning actor, and he is a captivating actor. Even in the trailers for Blade Runner 2049, where it looks like he's going to play the villain, I can't confirm that. That's just me hunching on the trailer. I mean, he looks like a dynamic character that's going to be a great foil to Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford. His Joker, I mean, it didn't do it to the extent that Heath Ledger's did, but it did keep me uneasy all the times he was on screen. And I thought they did capture a lot of the uneasiness that goes along with that Harley Joker relationship. I mean, you can say what you want to about it, you can glamorize it, but it's an abusive relationship, and you can definitely see that both in Margot Robbie's performance as well as Jared Leto's menacing performance as the Joker. I mean, I feel like if DC, EU, Warner Brothers, whatever you want to call them, would go full throttle with a Joker and completely commit to that actor and that version of the Joker, I think we'd be in a much better place. I was really excited to see that script that Johns had written for the Batfleck, in which it sounded like it was going to be almost an Arkham Asylum type game. Great game, play it if you hadn't. I wasn't a fan of some of the sequels. Asylum and City were the best, and they just got too dependent on the damn Batmobile. But I've talked about that before on this podcast. But it was going to be one of the earlier encounters with Batman and Joker, and we could see how he got the grill, how he got those teeth knocked out. It would be cool if we could have seen Leto as a more classic Joker, and then the way that crime transformed Bruce Wayne into Batman, maybe that not only has, the chemicals and the madness transformed the Joker, however you want to go there, you're going to go Jack Napier, whatever, into the Joker. I mean, how interesting would it be to see that classic Joker that we all know with the neatly put on makeup and bright purple suit slowly decay and degrade into that damaged Joker that we saw in Suicide Squad, that something happened or he was so traumatized by the bat that he changed his persona. I think that would be cool to see, but unfortunately we're not going to see that, but we are going to see a Matt Reeves Batman movie, supposedly, so I'm excited about that. It Chapter 2 is already in progress. The money that this movie's made as of Friday night, so counting the Thursday preview showings and only Friday showings, it had made $63 million. Even more impressive considering all the inclement weather that is occurring in the South and Southeast. It's a great movie. I'm not going to give my rating here. It's in my top 5 of the year. So when I heard that Chapter 2, which we knew it was coming based on the buzz and the predicted box office and the way that it was always going to be a divide between the kid story from the classic Stephen King novel and the adult story, instead of flashbacks like it is in the miniseries, or the back and forth like it is in the book, where you get one chapter as a young Bill and another chapter as an old Bill. But after seeing the movie, I was more stoked about this news, because as soon as the movie ends, it's like you want to put the next Blu-ray in and see part 2. But unfortunately, that's not how this is going to work. We're going to have to wait a couple years. I figure they can usually make horror pretty quick, but this movie was so successful, and it was on like a $30-something million budget. I'm willing to bet they have a $100 million budget next time, so there's going to be a lot more CG effects. I hope it doesn't get overly dependent on CG. Probably October 2019, we see this movie, Chapter 2. At the latest, October, September 2020. Who knows, we may see that about the same time we're watching the last season of Game of Thrones. Two things that I absolutely cannot wait for. Andy Muschietti, though, has given us that definitive take on Pennywise the Clown, along with Bill Skarsgård. His performance as Pennywise was bone-chilling. People were my friends have been a bit torn on it. Some think that he's the worst part of the movie. Others think he's captivating and the best part of the movie. It's nowhere near the level of performance as a Heath Ledger Joker, but it's the second most memorable clown performance I've ever seen in movies, televisions. And we'll be talking about this movie at the end of the year when we make our top 10 list. Staying in the horror realm, The Purge is finally getting that origin story in which we find out the story of the first Purge and why it occurred. It's called The Purge, The Island. We have no release date, no news on the director or a script. It is going to be very interesting, to borrow a word from my colleague and friend Andrew Stokes, to see how the hell things got to the point that the politicians of this universe felt that they needed something as barbaric as the Purge. And I think there's not a better time to show what could push society to that edge than right now, given our current political landscape. So usually I'm not too fired up about prequels, but this is one case where I am rather fired up about a prequel. So looking forward to getting more news on that. So let's go ahead and get into our featured discussion here. It was announced last week that Colin Trevorrow was out as Star Wars Episode 9 director, and the rumors began swirling and the top 10 list began circulating the internet of who should replace him. But we'll talk about that. But before we do, let's talk about Lucasfilm and directors. So it's not been the smoothest rollout as far as creators are concerned. Let's start with Josh Trank. After the Fantastic Four was the turd it was, that guy went to the bottom barrel of movie jail, because I have not heard from him since. He did a 4-part interview with Kevin Smith, Fat Man on Batman, like the year Fantastic Four came out, I think 2014, 2015. And so they did 1, 2, 3, and part 4 he's going to talk about Fan 4, and they were going to release that after the movie hit. Smith is the most candid guy you'll ever meet and here in the podcasting industry. And that episode 4 of that podcast was never dropped, never referenced. It was really weird. And I haven't heard from Josh Trank since, which is crazy considering that Chronicle, with Max Landis writing that script, was one of the movies that was like, okay, this guy who made this is talented. The way it's shot, the way it flows. I mean, Trank looked like he was going to be where a Colin Trevorrow ended up after Jurassic World, but that never was to be. Trevorrow was connected to and rumored to a Boba Fett movie and an Obi-Wan movie and a Yoda movie. Who knows what it was going to be. So he got the boot, but hey, performance reasons, I guess, although unfair. And then you had Rogue One. Gareth Edwards was on that movie from the beginning and stuck with it, but I wonder how much of what was cut, which was a ton, as you know, you've saw the trailers and you've probably seen Rogue One, they don't match up. Even though Rogue One ended up being a fantastic movie. I mean, I would give that an epic rating, and I rewatched it at the end of last year, and it held up. But I'm wondering if what was cut was a lot of the Gareth Edwards stuff. And then Kathleen Kennedy, who's the head honcho here, the legendary, the producer. This worked with Spielberg and Lucas. Spielberg and Lucas stepped in and it's like, okay, this is fine, I respect it, but this is not what I want. So what we got in the reshoots was more what Kathleen Kennedy wanted. Now, is that a problem? Because on one hand, you're limiting creative freedom. And if you really trust the people you've hired and entrusted with something like Star Wars that people love so much, shouldn't you have some level of respect and trust to them? But on the other end of the spectrum, she is the gatekeeper who is making sure that this stays the way that the fans expect a Star Wars movie to look, to feel, to sound, and not to get too crazy and outside the box with it. With Rogue One, that's a good example. We had the whole thing with Lord and Miller and the whole Han Solo debacle in which they started shooting. She didn't like anything she saw. She booted their ass off the ship really quick, faster than Anakin Skywalker's pod racer. But, I mean, that sounded like that was probably the best decision to make because they weren't half-assing it. It's just their style did not match something as structured as the most valuable franchise in Hollywood. And I think it was the best move to bring in somebody established like Ron Howard, which was a shift in Lucasfilm because you go from going to get that next hot director, the Rian Johnson after Looper, or the Gareth Edwards after Godzilla, or the Colin Trevorrow after Safety Not Guaranteed and The Lost World, to going to more established people like Ron Howard. So Trevorrow gets the boot. There was a script writer that was his good friend that he had worked with on his previous two films, Safety Not Guaranteed and Jurassic World, which is the highest grossing movie opening of all time, which is crazy. That movie made a crap ton of money. I think Star Wars Episode 7 surpassed it, but still. And once his script partner and friend got the boot, Kathleen Kennedy, while she didn't like that script or where that story was going, she really liked Trevorrow because of what he did with Jurassic World. And I've even heard these rumors that they're actually close personal friends, and hopefully there's no hard feelings here over what ended up happening. But he decided, after saying that he was not going to finish this movie and was going to leave, he decided to give it one more shot without a script writing partner. And apparently what Kathleen wanted and what Colin wanted were two very, very different things. We may never know. My guess is, with the way Star Wars books are, with the way the internet is, we will know. From what I've heard on multiple podcasts, read on multiple credible film sites like comingsoon.net/film.com, Colin Trevorrow was just kind of a pompous, egotistical ass on set and was kind of full of it after his success on Jurassic World. And he may be a big hotshot director in Hollywood, or he may think he is, but Kathleen Kennedy's the producer of Indiana Jones, and she's worked with Spielberg and Lucas, so she was probably not too impressed with Colin Trevorrow, despite the money that he made. And he was handpicked, guys. He is handpicked by Steven Spielberg to take over this beloved property of Jurassic Park. So, anyway, we get to Colin Trevorrow getting the boot. So the question is now, and I'll just go ahead and say I think this was the right decision for multiple reasons, but mainly because I trust Kathleen Kennedy's path for the sequel trilogy more than I do Colin Trevorrow's path. Who knows Star Wars better? The producer of other Lucasfilm products like Indiana Jones, or the guy who thought he was Steven Spielberg after directing a nostalgia bomb off of one of Spielberg's most iconic films. Now the question comes, who is going to replace Trevorrow? And let's go ahead and get into that. So there's all kinds of top 10 directors to replace Colin Trevorrow on episode 9 lists floating across the internet, and you can find those. But what I'm going to throw out here is a couple names that I think would be best. Some are more dream scenarios than others, and some are just fun to talk about because it would just be batshit if certain scenarios played out. My number one pick is Denis Villeneuve. Who better to come in and finish the Star Wars story that has recaptivated a generation than the guy who has brought us probably the most thought-provoking science fiction film of the past decade in Arrival. And it looks like he will also at that point have to his credit continuing another Harrison Ford, a legendary series, and Blade Runner, which 2049 again looks epic. But to me, Denis Villeneuve is the second best director going right now. And when I say best, I mean in the prime. I'm not talking about Spielberg here, behind Christopher Nolan. And obviously, a Nolan Star Wars movie would be crazy, but I just don't think Nolan and Star Wars, he could do it but if he wanted to, but I just don't think Nolan and Star Wars fit. I really want to see Nolan do a horror movie next, but we'll see. I'll be holding my breath for that announcement, what he's going to do next. But Denis Villeneuve has a unique visual style. The way he shoots things is really unlike anybody. It's hard to really just look at footage and be able to tell, oh, I can tell that Denis Villeneuve shot this, or Steven Spielberg, or Lawrence Kasdan, or whoever. But he has that. Denis Villeneuve has that type of style. And it's hard to describe. Stanley Kubrick is probably the most famous at having that unique visual shot style. And it's not something that every film... There's good filmmakers who don't have that. But I would love to see how Denis Villeneuve would subvert your typical Star Wars expectations and norms. That may be a little too out there, though, and I'm surprised Rian Johnson has pleased Lucasfilm so much, because I won't say he's an out there director, but he is a more outside the box director. If you look at Brick, Brothers Bloom, and some of his other films like Looper and whatnot. So Denis Villeneuve would be my number one pick. Matt Reeves would be my second pick. I think it would be best for him to run away from the DCEU as fast as possible, unless it's true, the rumors are true, and Batfleck is not going to be his Batman. And if he's going to get to do his own Batman trilogy for Warner Brothers, then I would just stick with that. But Matt Reeves shows in both his Planet of the Apes movies, especially War, that he can handle the conclusion to a saga. He's all about deep character, building character relationships, and paying off that character. And you saw he stepped in with the characters that Rupert Wyatt had made so good in that first Planet of the Apes movie, and what he did with them from getting them to where Rupert Wyatt had them in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and then doing it with Dawn, to ending it with War. he shows that he can end a war movie franchise. So if he's available, why not call him in to end this one? Of course, we have no idea what's going to happen. We haven't even seen Last Jedi yet, so how can we speculate about Episode 9? Maybe after we see Episode 8, it will become clear the type of director that needs to be chosen. Steven Spielberg has been thrown out there. I just think with Indy 5 coming out, who knows, that may be Spielberg's last movie, but he seems to be even more prolific at the end of his career than he was when he was getting going. Can't wait for the Pentagon Papers, by the way. But to see him in that director's chair seems highly unlikely to me, because he's such good friends with Lucas that I couldn't see him doing that. I won't say that would wrong George, but it would be like George stepping in to direct Indiana Jones without Spielberg. I just think that's such a friend, one of his best friends, if not his best friend's pride and joy, that I don't think he would do it, but it would be awesome. Rian Johnson, if Episode 8 is as good as it looks like it's going to be, based on how he's just outside the box enough, just subverts expectations enough, and he's been so great to the fans, brought everybody in that. I'm sure, Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm picked up the tab, Disney and Bob Iger as well, but bought everybody at Celebration who was waiting to see the trailer, brought them pizza with hundreds of boxes, signed everybody's autograph at Celebration of that poster they gave out. So he just seems like a genuinely good guy. So who wouldn't want him to get the job? Here is, I think, the most likely pick, J.J. Abrams. He started it, let him end it. My only fear is this movie would end up just like Return of the Jedi. And I'm being a little facetious there. I think J.J. could do this. He's had a respite. Ryan Johnson, sometimes called Rian, sometimes called Ron, said he would do it. A lot of people's like, he'll never do it. It's just too much time and energy on one project. But hell, it's Star Wars, and he's just as big of a Star Wars fan, just like JJ is, as any of us. So I think if they ask and they backed up the Brinks truck, JJ would do it. I think Rian would do it a lot easier. I wonder if there was any purpose in choosing different directors to direct these 3 different movies. Like, JJ did such a good job. Unless he said he was absolutely opposed to being the next 2, why not just keep him on? Although I'm excited with what Rian Johnson's going to bring us, but from what I heard, and Rian Johnson's been doing a lot of interviews, director of The Last Jedi, he said he would go into Lucasfilm. This is how he thought it would be. It wasn't how it ended up being. He thought he was going to go into Lucasfilm. They're going to be like, okay, in Episode 7, we want Ren, Rey, and Finn here. Episode 8 here, and we got to get here by Episode 9. No, they said, all right, this is where they're at the end of Episode 7, because he started working on Episode 8 before Episode 7 was finished with post-production. You figure out what to do with them next. It wasn't even like a Game of Thrones thing where it was like, because remember, Rian Johnson not only directed but wrote the script for Episode 8. It wasn't like Weiss and Benioff talking to George R. R. Martin and says, all right, this is where John and Danny need to go by the end, and they need to do A, B, and C. You fill in the blanks. No, they let Rian choose A, B, and C, not just fill in blanks. And I think that's why Kathleen Kennedy wants to make sure that it's absolutely done right. If you're giving a director that much, and you say you're limiting their freedom by Kathleen Kennedy kind of maybe nitpicking, but think of the freedom you're getting to tell the rest of the saga, not an EU book, not a animated show, but the saga. Dave Filoni's another one that fans won't. I just think there's no, those you don't know, he's the showrunner on the Clone Wars and Rebels. He probably knows Star Wars better than anybody beside George Lucas. He's studying under George Lucas. George Lucas kind of took this guy on as an adopted protege. So if they would trust him to do it, he could do it, especially at the story level. I just wonder if they would trust him to execute the type of shots you need in this level of a blockbuster without ever having directed a live action movie. I would bring him in to work on the script before I would let him be the director. Again, these lists are floating out there. Here's some names that we didn't mention. Brad Bird. He's too much animation. Ryan Coogler. Just don't match up with me. He's the guy who directed one of my favorite movies of the past 10 years, Fruitvale Station, and he's working on Creed 2 now. No way Ron Howard's going to do 2 in a row. Patty Jenkins is another one people are throwing out. Wonder Woman 2, people. I know she may haven't inked that deal, but that's happening. Some of these lists are just crazy. I'm scrolling through a couple different lists here, and they're eye roll worthy. The Wachowskis. I would like to see, that would be some crazy Star Wars movies, but Edgar Wright, a Star Wars movie. Can you imagine, people? Can you imagine? I could. I love Edgar Wright, but I don't know if his sensibilities fit Star Wars, let alone the end of a Star Wars trilogy. To me, Denis Villeneuve's the guy. I don't think he has any big thing. I mean, I'm sure he has stuff lined up, but it's not like in 2019, Denis Villeneuve's been connected to direct Blade Runner 2070 or something. I mean, he should be flexible and doing a Star Wars movie. To me, he's the guy. He's the one I would get, but even over Christopher Nolan, because as much as I love Christopher Nolan and think he's the best filmmaker going and alive today, not alive, that'd still be Spielberg. It doesn't fit, especially how much he relies on practical effects. Denis Villeneuve has nailed science fiction, like Academy Award level nominating, nailed it with Arrival. And I know Star Wars is more science fantasy, I get that, but I'm sure he could do that as well. And again, going back to that, continuing epic franchises and stories, as it looks like he's going to do successfully in Blade Runner 2049. I'd love to know who your picks are. If you have a favorite for director of Star Wars Episode 9, you can send that to me at Twitter at @TheRealBradBell. I'm on Twitter at TheReal Brad Bell. You can also email that to the Epic Review, thepicreview.com at gmail.com. Check out some of our other shows. We did a 74.1 where we were talking about Leo playing the Joker. That has not been denied yet, so we'll see what happens there. I did an NFL preview podcast. That was a lot of fun, getting to talk sports on the Confirmed Epic podcast for the first time, really. I predicted the Patriots to go undefeated in that episode, and they lost to the Chiefs on the opening game, so they're certainly not done yet. Keep pounding, go Panthers, though. You can find us on Instagram at Confirmed Epic Podcast. Find us on the Stardust app where we rate movies in the 60-second video form at Confirmed Epic. Find our shirts for the Confirmed Epic Podcast and Hokey Halloween Horror at tpublic.com/TheRealBradBell. Like us on Facebook at the Confirmed Epic Podcast. You can add me on Facebook at Real Brad, REEL Brad. Check out actionfigurebarbecue.com. That's barbecue spelled out, where Jerry, Barbecue17 Reed, is serving up hot and fresh action figure reviews daily. A lot of Force Friday 2 Black Series stuff on there. Put Kylo Ren up today, so I suggest checking that out. You can always find us at Geeks Worldwide at thegww.com, as well as theepicreview.com, thepicreview.com. Thanks for joining us for this very special 74.2 edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. I'm sorry that Andrew Stokes could not join us tonight, nor Jerry Barbecue17 Reed. I know you miss them. You want them back on the show, and it will happen. Like I said, next week we're going to be reviewing it. But until we meet you in the sewers with Pennywise the Dancing Clown, we are out.
That's all I have to say about that.
This has been a production of the GWW Radio Network. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, check out Geeks Worldwide at thegww.com for all the latest news, reviews, and opinions on video games, comics, movies, TV, cosplay, and more. Geeks, assemble!